My wife Heather and her sister Holly and brothers Gard and Forrest wanted to share some of their memories about their dad. Here's what Heather wrote. Dad lived his life true to his philosophy. He worked hard to support his family and provide us with more than he had as a child. Our fondest memories of our family vacations we took each year. All 6 of us piled into the family car, with the smallest sitting on top of suitcases in the back seat. Dad nearly always drove, with Mother taking pictures with the movie camera. We traveled to almost every state, sleeping in a tent or small camper, and cooking on a camp stove. Dad kept track of every penny we spent in a little notebook, and one of us always got the job of computing how many miles to the gallon we got. Dad was very proud of becoming an American citizen. One particularly memorable trip for me was in 1964, when we went to Washington, D.C. and New York City. Mom and Dad took us to see the White House, and we went to the top of the Washington Monument and took in the panoramic view of the city. I convinced Dad that it would be fun for us to walk down the stairs of the monument, and he foolishly agreed. Meanwhile, Mom took my sister and brothers in the elevator. About a half hour later, Dad and I reached the bottom, and fun was no longer the word he used. In New York, we took the boat to the Statue of Liberty, and Dad told us his story of coming to America on the Queen Mary. Dad also took me to the World's Fair in New York, and I remember visiting an incredible exhibit that demonstrated a video phone of the future. As kids, we had played with many old phones Dad had saved from his early years in the phone company before there were dial phones. Dad was so proud of working for the Bell companies that back in the 60s, when most homes had only 1 or 2 phones, Dad had a phone installed in every room of our house, including the bathroom. Our friends thought that was pretty cool. Camping was an economical way to travel, and that was very appealing to Dad. We camped in all kinds of weather, and no matter how cold or wet or hot or windy it was, we slept or tried to sleep in the camper. On one trip to Padre Island in Texas, a horrendous storm came out of nowhere. It was raining and blowing so hard that water was streaming in through all the zippers of the canvas. Dad was determined to save that camper at all costs. He instructed everybody to stand up and hold the braces of the camper for what seemed like hours so it wouldn't blow over. Against all odds, the camper was saved, and everyone managed to escape. Dad was always confident that things would work out, and they usually did. During our travels, we hiked in the woods, searched for birds and wild animals, climbed hills, smelled the flowers and pine trees, swam in the ocean, and collected seashells. We went to museums and art galleries and saw many historical places. At night, we'd toast marshmallows over the campfire while listening to Dad play the harmonica or whistle a tune. We'd marvel at all the stars in the sky. If it was too cold or rainy to be outside, we'd sit in the camper and play poker. Dad knew just about every kind of poker there was. He was always teaching us something new. Dad had spent most of his free time as a boy in the library, reading anything and everything. As a teenager, he was unable to continue formal schooling because he had to work to help support his family. But he continued his education on his own with his passion for learning and for books. My mom says that Dad was the only person she ever knew who had a bookmark in the encyclopedia. When I had to write a paper for school, I would always ask Dad to review it before I turned it into my teacher. He could always find improvements for me to make. This no doubt helped me hone my own writing skills. Dad also taught us how to speak properly by constantly correcting our grammar. He took a lot of pride in his command of the English language. He would always read in the evening after dinner, and more often than not, fell asleep in the recliner with a book or magazine over his face. Our friends joked that they weren't even sure what Dad looked like. That is, until he and Mom took a sculpting class together. They were instructed to make a clay bust of themselves. Dad's bust was exactly proportioned and meticulously detailed. Mom opted to make a bust of Dad as well, although hers was larger than life. Dad loved to ask friends which bust looked the most like him. You can imagine the answer he expected. Another example of Dad's artistic abilities is the portrait he did of himself while serving in the British Royal Marines during World War II, which you see there in the middle. Dad loved to solve problems and wouldn't quit until he figured out a solution. Never say die was one of his favorite sayings. To this day, when my brother Gard is wrestling with a problem, he can still hear Dad saying those words, and it gives him the needed encouragement to finish. Dad's intelligence, willingness to keep learning, desire to do a job right, and the need to conserve his money led him to do most of our home and car repairs himself. My brothers got to learn how to build and fix just about anything alongside our dad. One of those projects was building a big treehouse in our backyard. As kids, we slept there many a summer night, gazing at the stars through the trapdoor in the roof that Dad had built. Our backyard also had a huge birdhouse that Dad had built, and we loved to watch the hummingbirds come to drink nectar from the colorful flowers Dad had planted in his garden. Oh, that garden. Dad's garden was a small patch of England in America, and he tended it faithfully. Dad loved his homeland and shared his memories often. He and Mom traveled there frequently to visit family, and when our English relatives were able to visit here, Mom and Dad eagerly acted as tour guides on long car trips throughout America. He so loved England, he wanted all of us to explore it. I had the wonderful opportunity to travel with him there in 1967 and then spend a whole year living with my Uncle Don and Aunt Maggie. I also gained a love for his homeland and all my English relatives. Dad, your life's philosophy and legacy will live on through us and your grandchildren. Thank you for everything. We will try to follow your example and make the most of every opportunity life gives us. We love you and we miss you.
As one of Walter's younger brothers, I am honoured to be here with his family and friends to pay tribute to him on this sad day. In our childhood days, we depended on our big brother for his know-how, his general guidance, and also his protection from the local bullies. Usually a wag of his finger was enough to deter them. Looking back, I guess he was our anchor of confidence in those early years. He used to teach us games too, good ones. One of his favourite practical jokes was, after dark, to tie one end of a spool of black thread to somebody's front door knocker, reel it out across the street, and then we'd hide in the alcove, and then he'd pull the thread to activate the knocker. Knock, knock, knock. The occupant would open the door and, seeing no one there, look up and down the street. And then they'd go in again, and as soon as they closed the door, he'd knock again. Eventually, they got wise and broke the thread. We used to laugh our socks down. I remember one time we tried it on a retired policeman's house. The trouble was we did it 3 nights running. How stupid can you get? On the 3rd night, he was standing behind us. Whack! I can still feel it to this day. The same to my other brothers. Then he got hold of Walter, who had the spool of thread in his hand. I thought, hello, he's going to get a ladder in here. Anyway, Walt said, can't you take a joke? And he offered him the spool. And the guy said to him, don't let me catch you doing it again. And Walt got off scot-free. The power of negotiation. As we were walking home, still smarting, Walt said, we won't try him again. You learn by your mistakes. He was so wise, my brother. At the outbreak of war, my brother Donald and I were evacuated from the city of Manchester into the countryside in order to protect us from the Nazi bombers. I was 9 years old at the time. Walt was 14 and he was already working, so he wasn't evacuated. Donald and I lived in a small village called Wetley Rocks with a father and daughter who served as our guardians. Near the village, there were some steep cliffs that none of us could climb. When Walt came to visit us one time, he immediately scaled the front of the rocks, and my mates and I and some of the local boys stood there in awe watching him go up. After that, if I had any trouble with them, I'd just say, my big brother's coming and he'll sort you out. After the war, and after he had met his dream girl in Paris, Betty Lou, he was determined to emigrate to America. We couldn't argue against that, and we couldn't have stopped him anyway. We worried that we might not see him again, because that's how it was in those days. But thanks to the miracle of modern aviation, we've been able to spend quality time with Walt and Betty over the years. Between them, they've raised a wonderful, loving family, which is life's greatest pleasure. And our hearts are with them at this very sad time. We, his brothers, William, Donald, and myself, are all proud of him. His conscientiousness, his friendliness, and sense of fair play have remained with him throughout the years. We're going to miss you, Walter. Lead the way, brother. Lead the way. Thank you.
This poem is titled Granddad's Funeral, and it is by Roland McCall. The vicar's kind words had been spoken, delivered so eloquently. The flowers lay there as a token of everyone's sympathy. The family had gathered together to lay poor old Granddad to rest. Each one had made an endeavor to see they were suitably dressed. He'd said he preferred cremation. It's quick and efficient, said he. A prayer and a short oration will be sufficient for me. As the curtain closed on the coffin, his favorite tune was played. Then, in the limos they were off in, to the place where the buffet was laid. An invite to all was extended. Well, that is to all except one. His part in the show had now ended. The principal player had gone. Of the food and the drink that was gifted, you've done him real proud, they all said. And as the spirits were lifted, you'd be thinking that someone had wed. It is on these such occasions, sad though they may be, one gets to meet friends and relations that one doesn't often see. Soon the time came for dispersing. They all hugged, and then they were gone, each to their own ways diversing. It's true what they say, life goes on.
Well, again, I'd like to thank you all for joining us here today. A brief ceremony will be held at Evergreen Cemetery for the burial of the ashes and with honors by the American Legion. After the burial, everyone is invited back here to Heafy and Heafy for a light lunch. Again, thank you so much.
gather up as close as you can, folks. Just step out.
Yeah, that's it. Friends, I've been asked to share this poem with you. Do not stand at my grave and weep. Do not stand at my grave and weep. I am not there. I do not sleep. I am 1,000 winds that blow. I am the diamond glints on snow. I am the sunlight on ripened grain. I am the gentle autumn rain. When you awaken in the morning's hush, I am the swift, uplifting rush of quiet birds in circling flight. Do not stand at my grave and cry. I am not there. I did not die.